Welcome to Lead Live, a conversation for ministry leaders by ministry leaders. I'm Josh Franks.
And I'm Clint Berry, and we're the co-founders of the Lead program. Today on the show, we're joined by Leonard Tanks to talk church multiplication and strategies. That was a long countdown at the end. All right, we'll have to fix that. Well, hey, leaders, welcome in. I was like counting down myself. Welcome into another edition of Lead Live. I'm Clint Berry alongside Josh Franks. Josh, we had a good show today. Welcoming back our friend Leonard Tanks. And we're going to talk about church multiplication training. Why don't you take a minute and talk about an overview of CMT, why we're designing it. We're going to roll this out over the next couple of months, but give us a big flyover of church multiplication training.
Yeah, we're really excited for this new resource. It's something that you and I have been a part of for a while, and that's the coaching and training of church planters. But we believe that church multiplication should be part of the DNA of every Christian ministry, and church multiplication training is built into the Lead program, and so. We have been working on making a resource that's more available, more accessible for more people, not just for ministry leaders, but for ministry teams. And so how would you lead your team through something that would begin to instill the DNA of gospel multiplication into your ministry or church?
That's good. Yeah. And today we're going to talk about strategies. So let's give people, before Leonard comes on, let's just give people an overview of what we think a strategy is, right? So let's just give them a quick definition of that.
Sure. So in our mind, a strategy is a, program, or the thing that you do in order to accomplish the vision that God has given you. The thing that you do in order to accomplish the vision that God has given you. So vision is a picture of the future if God gets what he wants. And then strategies are what are you doing? What are you executing? What programs do you have? Even if they're formal or informal, loose or very structured, that move the people that God is giving you to the vision that God has revealed to you.
Yeah, so I would say also that basically our calendar, our ministry calendar, is going to communicate what our strategies are, right? So backyard barbecue could potentially be a strategy of the church. Like we're going to neighbor and we're going to invite people because we see that as not as an outflow of the vision, but we're getting people to accomplish the vision, right? So the actions and activities. So what we want to do is we want to bring Leonard Tanks on again to Lead Live. Leonard, so glad to have you on the show again. But for those who are new to Lead Live and just joining us for the very first time, would you please introduce yourself, a little bit about you and your ministry or family to get us going today?
Cool. Yeah. So, my name is Leonard Tanks. I am a 35-year-old church planter in Cleveland, Ohio, married to my beautiful wife, D'Angela Tanks, of 7 years. I have 4 children, 14-year-old, 11-year-old, 4-year-old, and 2-year-old. So we have a busy household here. And I pastor a church within the Christian and Missionary Alliance Central District area.
So what's up, Central District? Nice, cool. Yeah. So
Central District, Josh.
Central District, yeah. Yeah, which I found out that I actually scheduled Lead Live over top of another district-wide event that Leonard was very juiced about attending today. And so, sorry, buddy. Appreciate you keeping your appointment with us. Hey, sure. So, Leonard, let's talk about strategies. And within your teaching, you talked often about discipleship as the primary strategy. Did I understand it within the CMT teaching? Would you say that is the primary strategy of the church, discipleship?
Yeah, as far as church growth and church multiplication, yeah, I would agree. I would argue that the primary strategy is discipleship, or the primary Yeah, I say the primary strategy is discipleship.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
And what kinds? Go ahead.
So explain discipleship, because the strategy of discipleship can look different
Facts.
in different contexts and different outcomes. So when you say discipleship, what do you mean by that? Explain the strategy of that.
Got you. So for us, so in our church planning world, we've developed the definition of a disciple to be somebody who's called by God into a loving relationship with Christ for the purpose of becoming like Christ while living on mission with Christ. And so discipleship is all about focusing on the calling, because I believe that discipleship starts with evangelism. I don't believe that discipleship begins with a believer. I believe that discipleship begins when you're invited when you invite somebody to follow Jesus. So in John 1, Jesus invited the disciples of John to come and see, to follow him. I believe at that point, that's when the discipleship process begins. And so discipleship would be calling somebody initially in that beginning to call somebody to God, where God is calling, but he's using us, right, the medium, through evangelism, through creating interest, to invite those people into that loving relationship with Christ. So helping them understand, what does it mean to have a loving relationship with Christ? What does it mean to grow them into becoming like Christ? And what does it mean to help them understand how to walk and live on mission with Christ? So for me, discipleship is helping to draw out that definition through kind of these three filters: the cognitive, which is the learning aspect, and then the experiential piece, which is the hands-on, helping them to do what is it that I'm taking what I'm learning and putting it right into practice. Is something that we see Jesus do over and over and over again. He first taught them and showed them how to do it, and then he sent them out to actually do it themselves. And then the relational piece as well. So I'm going to teach them, help them to then help them to apply what they're learning into actual whatever their practical relative life requires. And then relational, meaning like walking with them walking with me, living life kind of with them. And so that's kind of what I mean by discipleship. But yeah.
Okay, so what would, as we lean into some strategies, as Josh and I were talking about the different things that are on your calendar, activities on your calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So if discipleship is a primary activity, right,
Mm-hmm.
and we're doing life together, let's break that down a little bit. So what are the events, what are the activities of discipleship or other? We could like go throwback and say, hey, Sunday school, that's a strategy, right, to move people towards the vision. That may not be what any of us would want to say is a primary strategy, but we would say that is a strategy. You can put it on the calendar, and that's supposed to operate toward moving people in the direction of vision. Okay. So what let's make a list, the three of us. What are the other actions and activities of the church? Maybe Tank, you go first. Throw some on the list. What are some actions and activities that would help move people towards the vision as strategies?
Yeah, got you. So so for us, we do discipleship groups, which are small, 2 to 3 people that they meet together. We walk through living like Jesus, loving like Jesus, walking like Jesus. And so we have those groups that meet once a week, and then after somebody completes like kind of like the first half of it, then they're invited to now launch a discipleship group with 2 or 3 of people that they know. So we do that. So creating.
Hold on. Sorry to interrupt you. But the living like Jesus, loving like Jesus, walking with, are those curriculum sets? Is that something you've developed, or are those just kind of general categories?
Okay, got you. No, those are so that's a curriculum set that we found to be helpful. You know, I always say when it comes to discipleship, It's not about, find a curriculum that you want to and just stick with it. So many people it doesn't work and they switch. It's like, oh, did you give it a whole season? Let it breathe, and before you just, and then because it's always good discipleship stuff out there. So we use the Live Like Jesus, Walk Like Jesus by Dan Spader. And that's kind of the curriculum. So it's a 10-week Walk Like Jesus that focuses on how Jesus walked, Holy Spirit depend, all of that stuff. And then it's a 10-week Live Like Jesus, which is all about how to now live on mission with Jesus. So we use that's what we use as our initial discipleship, and then from there the disciplers, they move through whatever books and different things they want to do. But that's just our initial. Everybody that's a part of our church will walk through those two things.
Great.
Very cool.
Brad just threw those links in the notes so you guys can check out what Tank is talking about in terms of that resources, the Walk Like Jesus kind of material that we're talking about. So we're talking about that. Josh, what else would you throw on the list then in terms of additional strategies that may be on a church calendar that would move people towards vision?
I think it depends on your vision for sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's the big thing, is to have clarity on what God is calling you to do and moving you into. I think, as Tank was saying, there's the general things of what we want every person who is a follower of Jesus to be formed into and to grow into, but the way that some of those things are expressed are going to be different depending on your church. So maybe a thing that could go on your calendar will kind of grow the numbers here a little bit. So from a discipleship group of 2 to 3 people, maybe to a smaller group, a small group, community group, city group, life group, some type of family environment. So maybe if a discipleship group is a brother to brother, sister to sister environment, depending on how your discipleship group is set up, it could be father to son environment or mother to daughter environment as well. So kind of bringing those together in a larger life group, small group, a more family environment. To grow in those relationships would be another strategy that people would use.
And so maybe then a family reunion environment, right, where we're getting, if we're just continuing to grow that up, a family reunion environment could be like a Sunday worship gathering or, big church picnic or something like that, where you're getting these, families together to love and encourage and, potentially receive, worship together, receive teaching together, that sort of thing. And so we could have built our strategies as such, 2 to 3, and does real close knit discipleship groups, kind of community group, and then finally like a worship gathering. And those could be the 3 primary strategies that we use for, XYZ church plant, something like that. But I agree with you, Josh. There's got to be real consistency with what are we trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. But Tank, how do we begin to ask questions on things like, is that really going to accomplish? Like, is the church, if the primary strategy is 2 and 3 gathered within a discipleship group, how do you know that that's actually moving people towards the vision? Because if a strategy isn't moving towards vision, it's a broken strategy. It needs to be replaced. Am I right about that? Like, talk to me about how do you make sure we're on course there with these strategies?
So I'll speak for what I do, which may not work for everybody, because remember, we're a church plant. So we are a lot smaller. So the capacity to do this is exhausting even for us. So I can imagine individuals who have a very large gathering. So for me, so what we do is I asked everybody, listen, run through the first 10 weeks. Don't change nothing. Don't adjust nothing. Just run through the 10 weeks as it is. Yeah. And then we're going to evaluate kind of at the end of those 10 weeks, what worked, what didn't work. How did the people respond? Did it produce anything? And then on top of that, I'm also, because I'm a church plant, I can touch everybody that's a part of our team. And so there's conversations that I have with individuals, and I'm asking them, how's the material going? But the biggest thing is also through those conversations, I know the material because I did it, right? And so I hear individuals on our team talking about it. Like, so, hey, that's something that I remember we was learning when I was reading our Walk Like Jesus, and the scripture said this. And so that's another thing. And so through those conversations, I'm trying to listen for if I'm hearing them, communicate things from the material. And then the biggest for us, because our vision is twofold: to see people in communities made whole, but also to create a disciple making culture in the city of Cleveland. And for us, for me, this is me, I tell our team that you have not made a disciple until they've made a disciple.
Amen.
And I'll also argue that you're not a disciple if you're not making a disciple. You're close, you're there, you're like, you're in high school, but you haven't graduated yet. And so I'm also looking at, which has been very encouraging for me to figure out, is this working, is literally seeing individuals who did not think they can make disciples now having their own discipleship groups with their friends and people that they're close with. And so I look at that and I say, hey, this is working, because it's producing what the desired outcome is that people will grow and that people would then reproduce within their own context of individuals.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Josh, what would you add to, hey, this strategy, or the questions, is the strategy working? Like, what are some of the questions that you ask your team at your local church at first? What are you guys doing to make sure strategies are on point?
Yeah, I think really simple, as Tank was saying, is we say, what do we want it to accomplish? And then, did it accomplish that? And if it didn't, then what happened along the way? I think the thing with strategies is we can often get sold that X, Y, and G church strategy is going to grow your church, right? So, I mean, even if you look at some promotional material and they're like, if you do this program, and any program is a strategy, our church grew by 56% when we did this. And so to think that, hey, if I do this, and a lot of pastors get into that mindset of, our vision is just to have more people. And they try to find that magic strategy, the silver bullet that's going to fix what's broken. But if you don't have clear vision from the Lord, then like Tank, you said, we've got two things that God's asked us to do. And so everything that we do is getting filtered through the question of, does this move us closer to that reality? Or is it just a distraction? Is it busy work? I'll say this. I was once part of a church, leading a church, and someone said to me, I really like a church that keeps you busy. And I was like, is that what's the benefit of that? I'm not opposed to, inviting people into greater commitment and being a part of things, but the vision of we just want to have a lot of things going on is not necessarily outcome based or vision based, and that's the thing that we've got to remember.
Yeah, that's good. Go ahead.
And I would say, and to that same point, Joshua, which is so true, which is, and it's tempting. It is tempting, but it also doesn't invite people to a greater, if I'm using your language, to a greater commitment of disciple making.
Sure.
Because what it does is, the busier a church stays, the more tie we make people to coming to the building to do the things. Yeah. And it's like, well, if you got 18 programs a week at church, tell me when so what we're asking people to do is just invite people to our building, what I'm saying? But when are you ever free to actually have, lunch with your neighbor? When are you actually free to go sit at the coffee shop and engage with the people in the community? And it's like, you're not, because we're keeping people so busy, which is code word for we want to keep the pastor so busy that we can continue to bring people to him so that he can teach them, train them up, and do what we're supposed to be doing, which is make disciples. And so anybody that's listening, I would encourage to fight. And it's tempting. I get it. It's very tempting to be like, we're going to create another program. We're going to do this, people.
Yeah.
But when you do that, I believe, and I'm learning this, that, you rob people of, man, the beauty of actually, man, being with people and making disciples, by just keeping them busy. And I think I've learned that from just, doing the church planning process, that our people, and obviously COVID forces a lot of us to no longer create just a bunch of busy work, unless you got people on 18,000 Zooms a week. But
right.
But that our people have appreciated the ability to be free to be with people, and not be overly committed to however many programs we create.
That's good. Yeah, I think you're onto something there. That's just creating space, and maybe that's a part of the strategy, right? We're going to intentionally create space. So that means, a streamlined, not a minimalistic church calendar, but a streamlined calendar of event, so that we can give you space to really kind of seep into the culture that's around you. But the execution of that particular strategy, Tank, gets really hard when you're expecting people to neighbor and to, be intentional at the little kid activities and, that sort of stuff that you're in. And I think that's why the concept of come along with me to see how I do this. The modeling is so important within that strategic piece. So, that's going to be an uphill climb for you guys with Reach City, but that type of mojo is what's going to carry the strategy. Now, let's talk to a couple of churches, because our church planting multiplication training is not just about moving the church plant forward. It's about all churches moving forward and having a multiplication mindset. So how do you kill a strategy, Tank? How do you stop a strategy? Let's say you can't pivot the strategy. You have to kill it. Like, what are the ways that you're going to destroy a strategy for a local church? Because it's not hitting the mark, right? You can't pivot it. You got to destroy it.
You asking me?
Yep.
How do you kill, destroy, maim,
and
crush people's dreams?
No, it's broken. It's over with. It's adios.
So
it's not doing it.
I'll be honest. The good thing is that I'm small enough where we haven't had to kill anything yet. Because we stop it from ever having birth, right now. But and so I haven't had a lot of experience in having to kill things or destroy it. However, what I do if I can speak like that, is as I remind our team when we talk about things, is that, listen, I know it may. Okay, matter of fact, I'm lying. I do know how to kill something.
Talk to me,
because I just thought about it, because I just had to do it. Like, I literally just had to do it with Reach City Church. Right. And one of the things that I found myself frustrated with was that it just didn't seem like God was doing the things that he said he was going to do when he told us to go sell our house, move down to Huff and plant a church. Right. And I found myself kind of in this place, it's just always something. We're trying to launch this ministry, and it's just constantly something that is stopping us from launching this ministry. Whether it's struggling with people, whether it's then COVID hits, we can't find a building, now, and we losing our worship leaders. They're moving to South Carolina now but for greater ministry opportunities, not like they're going to school, but they're going to be doing greater things because they're going to another city. But and so it's like, God, what in the world how are we supposed to plant this church if it just seems like we're never able to plant? And the thing that I had to come to grips to remember was that, because the idea of planting was about planning a Sunday service. And it seemed like everything that we were trying to do to get this Sunday service off the ground, it just always was something that was stopping it. And I'll never and so my mind had got drifted towards church planning strategy have the bangingest Sunday service and make people want to come to your Sunday gathering, outdo the next church, and they'll come. And because sadly, that's a lot of the ideas when we talk about church planning is not, we do want to have great gatherings for sure. But it was just make a great gathering, just try to outdo the next church and make them have good enough worship, good enough sound, good enough lights, good enough charismatic preaching that people will want to come. And I have slowly begun to kind of drift into that, and what God said, and so I had to kill it was, and my team reminded me of this. It was like, why do we feel like God's hand isn't on what we're doing? You always said you wanted us to be disciples and make disciples. And they literally tell me, like, we're making disciples, we're growing as disciples. So are we not accomplishing the vision? And it was at that moment that I realized, like, wait a minute. I was moving towards the wrong strategy. Even though we were operating in our actual strategy, I had another focus that was a different strategy that I literally had to come to my team, come to myself and just say, hey, we're done with that. And we're about to relaunch something completely different, right? Which is going to move to greater discipleship in Cleveland. And Sunday service, regardless of what COVID may do later on, we'll worry about what that needs to be much later. But we're going to launch disciple making ministries throughout Cleveland. And so literally I had to just, and it's not easy because there's still a part of me that's like, but what about Sunday? It's hard because you're conditioned, right? And so for me, it was literally, I had to come to this place where I could continue to be frustrated with God. I can complain. And the interesting thing was we were studying that, right? The Israelites were arguing with Moses about being in the wilderness when they didn't want to go into Canaan. You chose not to go into Canaan because you were scared. Now you mad. Now you're blaming me for being in the wilderness. And it was like, I'm getting upset with God for where I'm not thinking Reach City should be. And God's like, why are you mad at me? You're the one not doing what I told you to do. You're trying to force me to be over here. And that's not where I'm at. And I think that's how you kill, that's how you destroy it, is you literally have to go back and allow God to say, yo, I'm not there. So you could either be frustrated or you can have success, but you're never going to have success trying to climb a hill that I never told you to climb. You're only going to have success going wherever it is and operating however it is that I'm telling you to operate. And so with all humility, you have to, that's how I got to where I'm at now, is, if I don't know if that helps somebody, but
no, I mean, it underscores what we talked about at the beginning, which is everybody's orienting toward vision, right? And hopefully you guys are creating a culture there that is orienting everyone towards the vision, to say, man, we should do this, and it's like silver bullet. And they're like, no, we don't need to do that. Like, we're going here, and that culture that you guys are creating is so important and driven by the vision. And that way the strategies, this different strategies can change. They can shift over time. What you're putting on the calendar or not putting on the calendar, that is like it's subservient to the overall dream, right? The vision of where we're going. Then these different actions and activities, it's either gets us there or doesn't get there, right? Josh, go from there.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying about just being ruthlessly honest with your things, and see, it may take some time to evaluate and determine if you want to continue things that have been happening for a really long time, or even in a church plant, like they don't have to be happening for a really long time. Like when I was church planting, we'd do things once and they became sacred cows after, like we did one summer program and then everybody's like, well, we're not doing it next year. You're changing it. Like, yeah, well, easy, slow your roll. I mean, so it's easy for things to become cemented in people's minds. And it's hard, especially in churches that are established churches that have had certain ministries exist for a really long time, but have never been evaluated. The win is that you had it, not that it did anything, not that it moved people, men, women, children, into greater levels of discipleship. But you had it, or you always felt you had to do it.
Yep.
So, but I want to put that thing, Tank, that you were talking about, the Sunday service, right? The Sunday gathering, the Sunday
Here we go.
experience on the table.
Here we go.
I want to put that one on the table, mainly because I love what you're doing and I love what God is disciple making. And even before the show, right, we talked about how that gathering, that worship gathering, is not necessarily a strategy, but an outcome. Let me ask you this. Do you feel like the price of entry, if disciple making is your entry point, right? That's the non-negotiable thing that everybody is doing, and that's the entry point. Do you feel like the price of entry for people who are not necessarily believers is too high? Because some people would say that the strategy of the worship gathering is that it makes the price of entry much less involved. The commitment level is lower. And so there's kind of the strategy of moving people from a very uncommitted experience to a more committed experience that disciple, like a one-on-one or triad of people together who are holding each other accountable for the pieces of their life and growing together in the word and in their understanding and obedience to the Lord. Like that's a very invasive process. Tell me about kind of, those are two, I won't say they're different thoughts, but how do we manage that as ministry leaders? What are your thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts. Some softer, some not.
Sure, bring it.
I think so. For me, as I and some of this, by the way, is ever evolving. By the way, right? The more I'm into pastoring and church planting, obviously things begin to evolve a little bit and begin to understand different functions differently. But however, I think I still stand like I don't know if I think so. The discipleship process being kind of like too high of a cost of entry. I don't know. I mean, Jesus made the cost of the price of entry very high when he just flat out told people, like, leave everything and follow me. Like, that's your cost. Like, you like it or you don't. Now, obviously, we can be an extreme on that, but I think the other extreme is that we just invite everybody to a worship service that's not really about them to begin with. And we make them, and then we enter them into this false idea of what it means to be a disciple or what it means to be a believer. You know, I'm literally right now, I'm thinking about how the Bible's, how Paul says, listen, in Romans, like, your circumcision is of nothing. You know what I'm saying? When he was talking about that their walk in their life, and he's saying, but listen, but how you live makes your circumcision becomes of nothing, because it's not outward but inward to begin with. But I think we when we make the worship service the cost of entry, what we do is we teach people that circumcision is a value, apart from actually being a disciple of Jesus. And so I think on one extreme it's the cost of discipleship, as Jesus said. The other extreme is, and we just want to invite people to worship service. And I think that there needs to be a middle piece that bridges the two. And again, I'm saying that because if I'm making sense, go ahead.
You just equated attending a worship service with circumcision. So, explain that to me. That'd be an awesome. Hey, before you come in, make sure you're wearing a mask. And
yeah. So to clarify, what I'm saying by that is the people of Israel believed that because they were of the circumcision, because they were of Israel, they were of the covenant, because that Old Testament covenant sign was circumcision, that because of that, they believed themselves to automatically be a child of God, or whatever the case may be. And what Paul was saying in Romans was that But listen, your circumcision because of no value based upon the light when they were breaking the laws of God. And so he says, so if you who are circumcised break the law of God, then your circumcision becomes of no value. And the uncircumcised actually become the true circumcision of Christ, if those who are following the laws of God. And so what I'm saying is that when I say that worship and circumcision, we equating those two, is that we are telling people that this is what makes you a disciple. When in the world that we live today, people equate I go to church as I'm a Christian. No, the same way that Israel equated, hey, I'm circumcised. We have the temple, so we are the people of God. And God laughed at them. And then he destroyed their temple to show them that that don't mean nothing to me.
Right, yeah.
Similar to COVID, right? That's your COVID. And so that's where I think it becomes dangerous when the cost of entry is just come to a worship service, because I'm still of the camp that I don't think that Sunday service is about the unbeliever at all. I'm still of that family, that it's more about the believers gathering together to worship God and to encourage each other by the giving and the exchange and the spiritual gifts, to help spur us along and encourage us in our walk. So inviting a unbeliever to that is okay. I'm not saying don't invite unbelievers to church, but what I'm saying is that can't be the cost of entry. So what I like to do, and hopefully I'm making sense here. So what I believe for us is that the cost of entry is still discipleship. The reason that the cost of entry is discipleship for me is because, remember, I believe that disciple making starts with an invitation to follow. And so because of that, I start discipling people when I say, hey, man, there's this guy named Jesus. Man, are you interested in knowing anything about him? Would you care to just journey with me for a little bit and to learn about Jesus? Right now, that person has entered into disciple making with me. I might not invite them to a church service right away. I might just invite them to that coffee with me once a week. We just gonna talk. As they begin to journey, because that's what Jesus did, right? John chapter 1, they said, hey, are you John says, here's the Lamb of God. They start looking. Jesus turns around. What's up? Hey, man, John said you this. Are you? He said, well, just come hang out with me, right? They came and hung out with him. And then through that hanging out, they became confident that Jesus was who he said he was, right? But they began to follow him even when they wasn't sure if he was who he said he was. And so now I'm walking with this individual in a discipleship group, in a coffee group, whatever it is. And through that, I start to say, hey, man, by the way, man, we gather on a Sunday, man, just to worship this Jesus I've been telling you about. Hey, if you're interested, man, you can come hang out with us. Hey, here's the link, right? New age conversation. Here's the link to our service if you want to kind of watch what we're doing. And so I don't think that that's too high of a cost, because all I'm doing is inviting somebody, hey, man, to explore if Jesus is who he say he is with me. And either they say no or they say yes, but I don't think that's asking them to this great commitment. Because if you're not, and I know this gets sticky, somebody can critique this, but this is my thoughts. It's working, by the way. This is a working theology, right? If you can't commit to having coffee with me to learn about this Jesus, then why would you commit to coming to a worship service to worship this Jesus? Then you know what I'm saying? Then what you're really committing to is a show. And I think that when we invite people to that, and that's the way they enter into it, then it makes the job of the disciple maker much harder when they have to deconstruct that ideology to move them to a true understanding of disciple making. That's my thoughts. Critique it, love it, hate it. That's just where I'm at right now.
No, actually, I really appreciate those thoughts. I just wonder. Well, I don't wonder anything. I want to encourage you in that. You know, one of the areas of strategy that a lot of churches and ministry leaders don't think about maybe, is outreach. How do they impact their community? How do they expose light to darkness? All those. I'm hearing what you're saying is that you're building that into the discipleship of, every man, woman, and child, and that they have responsibility to the people that God's put them around. And so at what point? Well, let me ask a different question. So, are there other strategic or strategies for outreach that people should or could be considering?
Yeah. So, and again, and that's why I go back to just my definition of discipleship and making starts with an invitation to follow Jesus, to create what we call it is ICM. So I, C, and then M. When you say it really fast, it sounds really cool, Josh. And the way I say it really fast is, as God sees them, I see them. Right? I see them. Interest, conversion, maturity. So what I teach is we need to create an interest, right? When John said, "Behold the Lamb of God," he created an interest to his disciples to be like, yo, who is the Lamb of God? And so when we do outreach, the sole purpose of our outreach is to spark an interest into somebody who does not know Jesus, have not experienced Jesus, or does not know Jesus as a person who serves and loves people. And so all of our outreach is based around, how do we intentionally create interest with the community of people that we serve? Right. And so that's why we do things like the blessing boxes. That's why we do things like pop-up cookouts. That's why right now we're trying to figure out how to identify a location to begin to do relief programming for single moms that are trying to do, they might need an hour of just peace. Right. All we're trying to do with this, and then actually right now we're writing up and adopt one of the project housings over here. We can't adopt all of Ward 7, but we can adopt the children of that project housing. And so we're all of that is to get somebody to say, wow, the church cares. Why does the church cares? Well, because the church cares because Jesus cares. And now somebody, what I'm saying? And now we're creating interest, and not selfishly, right? Is motivated by one thing and one thing only, the love of God. Our desire to do outreach is motivated by the Great Commission, which is rooted in God's love for people, right? And so it's not selfish. We're not thinking about church growth, honestly, and none of the outreach that we do. That's why we don't bait and switch people. We don't, what I'm saying? We don't invite people to a cookout and overload them with Reach City stuff. We don't, because we're not trying to bait and switch them. We're trying to genuinely serve people. And out of that, sometimes people ask about us as a church. And so I believe that outreach is I guess a strategy that needs to be intentional to the people that you serve. Every barbecues aren't going to be great for every community. Blessing boxes aren't going to be great for every community. Adopting a project housing is not going to be great for every community, because you might not have a project housing. But it's seeking with the ear of the people. Right. So we work with our council person. Hey, man, the community better than us. You think this would be something that the community would enjoy and needs and can serve the community? And if he says no, I'll be like, all right, well, maybe that ain't a good idea. If he say yes, our team says, let's do it. And so outreach, I guess I'm thinking I'm answering your question, Josh, but so outreach becomes so key in the disciple making process, because it literally is the thing that creates common ground between the community and the church, and also shows the church shows the community that there's a body of believers who cares about them. And half the time they don't understand why we care about them, which now invites them to say, why you care? That's interesting. Let me tell you about this love that Jesus has for you. And now from there, we say, hey, you want to have coffee with me to talk more about this?
Right.
And then from there, we say, hey, you want to come to a service with other people that are like-minded and meet other people that's a part of a community that loves like this? And I don't know. Did I answer your question? Sometimes I think don't answer the question.
I think so. I think often we think of outreach strategy is, how can I get as many people together to share the gospel with them and get some hands in the air? But what I hear you saying is, when you're thinking about outreach, you are thinking, how can we genuinely love and serve our community so that we can build interest in trust relationally, interest in the love of God that is shown through the body of Christ, so that you can invite them to talk more that there'd be a relationship that they'd be willing to have, not with you specifically, but with other disciples in your church, and say, hey, let's get together and talk about who you think God is and maybe what the Bible says about who he is.
That's good. That's good. Hey, we've got a question. So, Tank, I'm going to dial this question up. So here, Brent says this: have you seen your people who are previously churched or religious bucking back on this strategy? Talking specifically about the ICM strategy. He says, I'm not in a church plant, but just curious how you've handled leading people beyond what they're comfortable with for the better thing, i.e. discipleship. And so, for you, Tank, because that's the thing. People think, oh man, like blank slate, church plant. You can do whatever you
plant
want.
A church.
It's like
so easy.
So you can do it easier than you could in an established church. But I think the opposite is true. When I was church planting, you had so many different forms and variations and likes and dislikes, and you've got to get everything lined up and then bought in to the strategies. But talk to me about Brent's question. Do you have anybody bucking back on this thing? And just saying, yo, I just showed up here for worship Sunday morning. Like, that's what it's about. Like, I see them, God sees them, we all see them. Like, it's great, but I'm here to worship. Or, how have you handled the leadership of that and getting people on the same page and helping people buy in to a strategy that is so great and enormous like discipleship? Go for it.
Yeah. So this is when you have to be a ruthless leader. And this is when you got to take the Jesus approach. Go sell everything. You don't want to buy. But no, honestly, so the what you said is true. One, when you're church planting, because I thought I was foolish to think that as well. So I thought that. I was like, blank slate, man. We could get this thing from, not true. Not even close to true. No. Even the people that's never been to church still has a concept of church. And it's like, you don't even know, you were just a believer yesterday. Where is this coming from? TV, grandma, whatever, right? Yeah. There's a concept of church still. And so I will say this, I haven't had people necessarily verbally buck back. They just leave. So and the reality is I never understood why they say that 70% of church plant, you lose 70% of the people you started with in church plants, whether they got bored, went to something else. But a large percentage of that is because people didn't really understand the vision. Even when you were clear with it, they didn't understand it. And then when you start to actually implement the vision, they like, whoa, wait a minute. Why are we not doing this? And it's like, well, because I told you that's not, what we're doing. And then they leave. And so I haven't seen people necessarily buck back, but I have seen people walk away from the ministry. And which hurts, by the way. We talk about church hurt a lot. We need to talk about pastoral hurt. It hurts. And especially when you're trying to launch something, it hurts even more because it's like, shoot. But yeah, so I've had people walk away because the discipleship piece, as Josh said earlier, was for them, was kind of with the cost of entry was too hard. But what I've also learned was it wasn't necessarily that the cost of entry was too hard. I've had people that's been in the church walk away and it was about pride. I believe it was about pride because they didn't know how to make disciples and they didn't want to admit it because it would make them seem like, you know what I'm saying? And it wasn't about, they do love disciple. It was like, how in the world do you do that? And the concept that you did that was the preacher on Sunday stands up and he preaches and he makes disciples for people. And when you say something differently than that, then it's like, well, wait a minute, I don't really know how to make disciples. And unfortunately, because I didn't know how, you know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, we too prideful to say, I don't know how to do it. And so you just leave to go back to what is comfortable, where you can say you're making disciples because you invited somebody to church on Sunday. That was mean. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that.
Well, but there's a little bit of space there, right? For that kind of Andrew, telling Peter, hey man, you got to come and check this out. Or, the woman at the well, come and see, like, because in the early stages of maturity, right? Maybe that's the best way to stir interest. So there's an interesting piece to all of this, that how the body begins to move around and how the behavior of us as individual disciples. So So we don't want to, and I'm going to speak for me. I wouldn't want to say, hey, Rob, you can't invite people to church, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're a new disciple of Jesus. You need to, take them out for coffee. That's the strategy. Mm-hmm. This is the way that this works. However, you would say, bro, great job bringing someone to church. Let's meet more regularly because I want to help you to be confident that you can share these things with another person. So I am getting them there, but it's the M part. It's the maturing part of the ICM, right? So we're going to help that person particularly grow. So wherever they are in this, being able to have this clarity of strategy like you have, Leonard, is going to help people loop back in and stay on point with vision. All right. And so that's one addition that I would make there. Rather than just kind of going, you can't do that, Junior. You know what I'm saying? We need to make sure that they're there. So I'm reading through another comment here. I want to see if we're going to throw this on the screen here.
Yeah, as you're reading through that, I'll add to the conversation. I think there's space and capacity for this both and model, but it doesn't mean you don't have preference or you don't have priority, right? Good. So to let people know what the priority is and the things that if push comes to shove, these are the things that are dropping off of the calendar or list or whatever first, is important. And most churches would say, you know what, those discipleship groups, we can let them go as long as we keep the worship service going on. And maybe if you're really pressing into discipleship, you're saying, you know what, that worship service, we can let that drop off if push comes to shove here, but we are not going to stop our specific disciple making strategy.
That's good.
So I think that's the shift. So often we think, man, we got to kill the things that aren't doing it, instead of saying, no, we have priorities that are shifting in our church or shifting in our lives. And that means that if capacity becomes an issue, we're willing to let the things that may have used to be priorities in life or ministry drop in order to really press into the important things.
And what Clint said, I seen Brent's comment too, and I agree absolutely. What you said is the disciple making process, like you said as well. Yeah. It is the come and see. Hey, you got to come see. I met this Jesus guy, but then Jesus still were moving them to a no. You go and do it. Yes. You know what I'm saying? And I think, and so I agree. Like, as a new believer, you're going to invite people to church. I tell them, invite them to a discipleship group where the person who's discipling you joins you, and now y'all form this group together. So I still don't tell them invite them. Well, I think I always say invite somebody to church. That's just generic Christian language. Hey, it's Sunday. Invite somebody to worship with you. Like I'm never going to not say that. However, once you invite somebody, I'm going to begin to ask you, who's that? How you know him? Hey, you should walk with him, which I think, I don't know if you wanted to put his comment up there, but to his first part, where he said, so with people, are they buying into the new strategy? Are you seeing people come alive in their faith in a whole new way? Like, absolutely. I'll even throw a name out. She may be watching. So there's a lady, well, actually two people. Myrna, y'all know Myrna. In the beginning of this strategy, me having to really hold my ground and push people, like, 2 or 3 people. Well, what if we want to invite? They want to invite this person and this person. I said, tell them no. I said, encourage them to go and walk with and do a group. Well, nope. Had to hold my ground. And if you talk to Myrna now, she's like, wow, it's so crazy because we literally have seen people who said, I don't want to make disciples. I'm uncomfortable make disciples, literally enjoying the fact that, like, wow, like, do you understand? Like, I'm meeting with somebody. They've asked me questions about Jesus. They were never even interested. I never thought they would even care. And now you see them being like, kind of, it's seeing purpose to like, hey, I belong to the church. I don't just I'm an active participant. I am, right, which is the end of, like, to live on mission with Christ. I am actually a part of the mission of Reach City Church, and I'm not just a pawn that we throw out there, you know what I'm saying, to bring people so that Tanks can have a greater audience to stand in front of and speak great and wonderful things to. But it's like, that's me being funny, but it's like, no, I'm actually and so I've seen the fire, which also, by the way, has ignited me as a pastor, right? Because sometimes I struggle, but I hear their stories and I'm like, yes, let's go. Like, yes, now I'm about to go out there. I'm about to go share my faith with somebody, because y'all can't be outdoing me out here. Like, I got to lead this thing. So it also ignites fire in me to see people actually enjoying disciple making and being ignited by it.
Yeah, and I know you're being funny about, just inviting people to come and hear you speak. Here's the beauty of this, is that you are a really good speaker, preacher, communicator. Really like, you could choose the model that says, listen, just bring people. I'm going to wind it up and I'm going to let it loose on a Sunday, and people are going to be impressed and probably grow and learn. So, like, you could choose that model. So to me, knowing you, like, I just appreciate how much more you're saying, no. We could do it that way, but this is not what Jesus is asking us to do. He's asking us not to centralize or minimize even gospel transference to other people, but to multiply it, right, and to recognize that it's not just about, it's not just about showing up. It's about embracing the call that being a follower of Jesus means to be a discipler.
It's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Making a movement gets every person in the game, right? Movement makers get everybody involved. And so for you to play point guard, and actually move the ball around, right? I'm not talking about NBA point guard. I'm talking like high school or college point guard. I'm talking about like actual game players that include other people. But for you to include people gets the movement going, and for them to go, oh, I can do this. In a really good way. I don't need the pastor to do this for me. They get that privilege of serving Jesus in a way that before they just thought, well, I'll show up, I'll give my dollars, and I'll, come to all the events. But pastor is the one who gets all this. He gets it, and I'm going to send people to him. It gets people in the game in a way that's really exciting. So that's also something to think about and consider as we're working through strategies, is how big of reach, how much inclusion can we get from our ministry leaders, from the people who are around and within the church. How can they join and execute and help us execute to move people toward vision? Hey, we're at the top of our hour, guys. So we're going to move into final thoughts. Josh, give us your final thought for this conversation on strategies today.
My final thought is that I could sit and talk to Tank for a very, very long time. And so appreciate you coming and joining us. So I think my final thought is this, that if you don't know what God is asking you to do, your strategies are just going to be pick and choose. And you're going to try to figure out the thing that either makes you feel the best, or that the loudest voice in the room is trying to convince you to do. And so you have got to spend time getting clarity on where God is asking you to move. And I would agree with Tank that it all has to end in the disciple making people, which results in those people making other disciples.
That's good. Tank, give us your final thought on this conversation for this Lead Live episode on strategies.
Yeah, I would just echo everything that Josh said. Especially as a person that's got a lead ministry, whatever ministry God is calling you to lead, is really knowing what God is calling you to do. Because it's not about right and wrong all the time. It's about what is God telling me. He may not be telling me what he's telling them. And if I try to do what they're doing, then I'll find myself unsatisfied, unfulfilled, and ultimately losing because it's not what God is calling me to do. And so whatever your multiplication strategy is, if it does not end obviously in in a culture that makes disciples. But if it also does not end to look like what it was supposed to look like, then I would say you have to reevaluate and abandon ship as quick as possible. Do not think that you can just, synchronize it. We figure out how to make it work with it. Abandon ship, restart over, get your leaders back together. Say, as a leader, be humble enough to say, I led us wrong. Okay. And I spent some time with Jesus, and I'm repenting for misleading us. But now we have to restart this thing the way that God is calling us to do it, so that we can actually see the desired outcome of what Jesus wants and what you guys all signed up to be a part of.
Amen. That's strong. My final thought for this conversation is, you really do have to be ruthless with these. All right. If it's not working anymore, you got to ditch it. And so some of those, for those of you who are in established ministries, taking people into a process of evaluation. So a part of church multiplication training is measures. And so we need to have measurement tools. We need to come up with a rubric, so to speak, in order to know, are out 1 out of 5? Are we good? 5? Are we a 1? We're failing. And so to be able to measure those things, and then it's really easy once you see the data to be able to go, man, that strategy is not getting us to the measurement that we want. And we're not just talking about nickels and noses, right? We're talking about advancement in the Christian life. So those measurements are going to instruct some of our strategies on what are they going to do. So, but we need to be ruthless. Like in hiring, you hire slow and fire fast. With strategies, it's the same way. You develop and you think and you pray and you execute, and then you make it work. But the same thing is true. If it's not working, it's out, and we're going to reconstruct it or make it pivot. And the best way to do that is evaluate, right? And you've got to ask your team over and over and over again, is this getting us where we need to be? Is this doing it or not? And to be able to receive that feedback as a leader, especially if something's kind of your baby, right? Especially if it's your baby, to be able to receive from your team what's broken, what could be better, and something like that. That's where leaders really excel, is to receive feedback from their team and to make the necessary pivots. Tank, it's great to have you on Lead Live today. I appreciate you being with us, man. We're praying for you and Reach City Church and what God is doing. We're cheering for you. And we just love what God is doing in Cleveland as a result of your work there. Josh, as always, great to be in this conversation with you, and thankful that we get to do these. We learn so much week after.
Yeah, always a good time.
All right, guys, appreciate you, and leaders, lead on.